There were exactly $42,000 in medical bills sitting on my kitchen counter. My mom had been in the ground for less than 4 hours, and I was standing in the house I grew up in, staring at a stack of past due notices from the hospice center. I'm an ER nurse. I work 12-hour shifts. I save flies for a living, but I couldn't save her. And looking at those numbers, I clearly couldn't afford to pay for her the final days either. From the living room, I could hear the loud, booming laugh of my stepdad, Gary. We were supposed to be having a quiet week, a moment to remember my mom. Instead, Gary had turned into a hangout section with his buddies. Gary owned a local construction company. He was a big guy, 62 years old, with a thick beard and the kind of fake, friendly smile that made everyone in town love him. To the outside world, Gary was a saint. He was the hero who stepped up and married my mom when I was just 7 years old, right after my real dad, Mark, died in a terrible accident on the job site. Everyone always told me how lucky I was to have a guy like Gary. Honestly, I never felt lucky. Gary was controlling, cheap, and cold. He liked to look good in public, but behind closed doors, he treated my mom like a maid and treated me like a burden. I took a deep breath, picked up the biggest bill from the counter, and walked out into the living room. Gary was standing by the fireplace in his expensive dark suit, holding a bottle of beer, soaking up the sympathy from his contractor friends. "Gary," I said, keeping my voice low, "can I talk to you for a second?" He gave his friends a sad, brave little smile, playing the part of the grieving widower perfectly. He followed me back into the hallway. The second we were alone, his warm smile vanished. His face went hard. "What is this, Sarah?" he sighed, sounding annoyed. "I have guests." "The final hospice bills came," I said, holding out the paper. "They're asking for 42 grand. I maxed out my credit cards covering her medications last month. I need help, Gary. You're her husband." Gary didn't even look at the bill. He just crossed his arms and looked down at me like I was a stupid child. "Sarah, sweetie," he said, using that patronizing tone I hated so much. "You know, money is tight right now. The business is eating up all my cash. Building materials are expensive. I simply don't have it." My blood boiled. "Money is tight? Gary, you just bought a brand new F-250 truck last month. You go to the country club every weekend. That is her medical debt." Gary took a step closer to me. His voice dropped a cold whisper. "I paid for a funeral, Sarah. That was my gift. You're 35 years old. You're an adult. You need to put on your big girl pants and figure this out. Now, excuse me, I'm gonna back to my friends." He turned his back and walked away, leaving me standing there holding a piece of paper that was going to ruin my life. A heavy wave of exhaustion washed over me. I walked back into the kitchen, leaned over the sink, and started to cry. It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that I was completely, totally alone. Then I heard the back screen door squeak open. I wiped my eyes quickly and turned around. Standing in the mudroom, shaking rain off her cheap plastic coat, was an older woman I hadn't seen in almost 30 years. She looked small and fragile. Her gray hair was wet and sticking to her cheeks. but I recognized her eyes. They were the exact same shape as mine. "Aunt Judy?" I whispered. It was my real dad's sister. After my dad died, Gary completely cut her out of our lives. He told my mom and me that Judy was crazy, a drug addict, a liar. He legally banned her from coming near house. I grew up thinking he was a monster, but looking at her now, she just looked like a tired, terrified old woman. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaking. She looked past me, staring nervously at the door that led to the living room. "Is he in there?" "Gary? Yeah, he's in the living room," I said, confused. "Judy, what are you doing here? If Gary sees you, he's going to call the police." "I don't care," she said, stepping quickly into the kitchen. She smelled like cheap cigarette and rain. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me, Sarah. I don't have much time. Judy, you need to go." "Your mother called me," he interrupted. Her eyes were wide, pleading me to listen. 2 weeks before she died, she called me from a hospice center. She was crying. She said she couldn't leave this world with a secret anymore. She told me to wait until the funeral. She knew Gary wouldn't be paying attention today. My heart starting to beat a little faster. Secret? What secret? Judy reached deep into the pocket of her wet coat. He pulled out a small cold brass key and passed it into my palm. He closed my fingers tightly around it. "First National Bank downtown," Judy whispered. "Safety deposit box number 412 is under your mother's maiden name. She paid for it in cash for the last 28 years." I stared down at the key in my hand. I felt heavy. "What is inside it?" "The truth," Judy said, her voice breaking. Everything she was too scary to say while she was alive. Suddenly, we heard a loud burst of laughter from the living room. Gary's voice echoed down the hall. "Hey, who wants another beer?" Judy flinched, like she had been hit. Panic washed over her face. She immediately backed away toward the door. "I have to go. Do not tell him I was here, Sarah. Please, if he finds out, he'll hurt me." "Hurt you, Judy? Wait." I took a step toward her. "What did he do? Why are you so afraid of him?" Judy stopped with her hand on the doorknob. She looked at me, and I will never forget the absolute heartbreak in her eyes. "Everyone thinks he's the great guy," Judy whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. "Everyone thinks he stepped up when your dad died, but Gary didn't step up to save you, Sarah." She looked back at the hallway door one last time. "He bought you." Before I could say another word, she slipped down into the rain, letting the screen door click shut behind her. I stood in the dead silence of the kitchen, clutching the cold brass key in my hand. I didn't know it yet, but my entire life was about to be burned into the ground. I didn't go to work on Monday. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of First National Bank. Holding my phone to my ear, I told the charge nurse at the ER that I had a fever and I couldn't come in for my shift. It was the first time I had called in sick in 3 years. It was 8:45 in the morning. The bank didn't open until 9. I just sat there, staring at the front doors, rolling that small brass key between my fingers. My hands were freezing. I hadn't slept a single wink the night before. Aunt Judy's words had been playing on my loop in my head all night. He bought you. Then the bank doors finally unlocked. I walked straight to the front desk. "Hi," I said to the younger teller. My voice sounded rough, like I had been screaming. "I need to access a safety deposit box, box 412. I showed her my ID and my mom's death certificate. The teller gave me that soft, pitying look people always give you when somebody dies, and she led me back into the vault. She used her key, I used mine, and she pulled out a long, heavy metal box. She set it down in a small, windowless privacy room, shut the door, and left me alone. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't barely open the lid. I didn't know what I was expected to find. Piles of cash? Gold? But when I opened it, there was no money. There was just a thick brown merino envelope. It smelled like dust and old paper. I didn't open it in the bank. I didn't want to break down in the public place. I shoved the envelope into my purse, hurried back out to my car, and locked the doors. The morning sun was shining through the windshield, making inside the car warm. But as I opened that envelope and dumped the paper onto my passenger seat, my blood ran ice cold. The first thing I picked up was a photocopy of life insurance check, dated October 1996. That was exactly 2 months after my real dad, Mark, died. I stated the number on the check, $500,000. My heart pounded against my ribs. $500,000. I grew up wearing thrift store clothes. I worked 3 jobs in the college just to pay for nursing school. My mom died stressing over $40,000 hospice bill. And here was a check for $500,000. I looked at the signature line my mom had endorsed. The check over a joint bank account, an account controlled entirely by Gary. He took the money from my dad's death to start his shiny, successful construction company. I felt sick to my stomach. It got worse. The next paper was a copy of the old police and workplace accident report. I read through the dry, typed words. Victim, Mark Davis. Cause of death, accidental fall from scaffolding. Contributing factors, empty beer cans found in the victim's trunk. Victim was deemed intoxicated on the job. "No," I whispered out loud in the empty car. "My dad didn't drink, not ever." Finally, I reached the bottom of the pile. There was a small, cheap blue spiral notebook, a diary. I opened the cover. It was my mom's handwriting. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. I started reading, and with every sentence, the world I thought I knew completely shattered. August the 12th, 1996. The first page read, "Gary is lying. He told the cops Mark was drunk, but Mark had been sober for 4 years. Gary planted those cans in the trunk. I know he did." I turned the page. My hands gripped the edges of the notebook so hard, my knuckles turned white. September the 3rd, 1996. I finally confronted Gary today. I told him I looked at the scaffolding box in the police photos. They didn't just break. They were completely unfastened. Gary was the only one up there before Mark. I told him I was going to the police. I stopped breathing. Gary didn't just take the insurance money. He rigged the scaffolding. He murdered my dad. I forced my eyes back down to the page to read the rest of the entry. "Gary didn't even yell," my mom wrote. "He just smiled at me, that cold, dead smile. He told me that if I went to the cops, he would deny everything. He said he already had the life insurance money in his account. He told me he would hire the most expensive lawyer in the state, prove I was a crazy, grieving widow, and take Sarah away from me. He said he would leave me homeless and I would never see my little girl again. A tear dropped from my chin and hit the paper, smudging the blue ink. I am so sorry, Sarah. The next line read, I was so scared. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. He trapped me. I married him to keep you safe. I traded my life so he wouldn't take yours. I lived with a monster for 28 years so you wouldn't have to grow up in a foster care. I dropped the notebook on the passenger seat. I pressed my hands against my face and just let out this awful, choking sob. For 32 years, Gary had played the perfect stepdad. He walked around our town shaking hands, acting like a hero. Meanwhile, he had murdered his business partner, stolen his money, and held my mother hostage in her own life with the threat of taking me away. I cried until my eyes burned and my chest physically ached. But then something strange happened. The crying stopped. The sadness just completely dried up. And in its place, the wave of pure, hot anger washed over me. It wasn't the kind of anger that makes you want to scream and break things. It was cold, quiet anger. The kind that makes you want to burn someone's entire world to the ground. I wiped my face, picked the notebook back up, and flipped into the last page. There was only one sentence written there, heavily underlined. Find Arthur pending. He was the foreman. He was there that morning. He saw Gary do it. Arthur. I remembered Arthur. He used to come over for barbecues when I was really a little girl, before Dad died. Then just like Aunt Judy, he completely disappeared from our lives. I grabbed my phone, opened my browser, and typed in Arthur's name and our county. I didn't care that Gary had a big company. I didn't care that he was rich or that all his country club friends thought he was a great guy. He has stolen my dad. He has stolen my mom's life. And now, I was going to take absolutely everything from him. I put the car in drive, pulled out of the bank parking lot, and went to find the only man who could help me set the trap. It took me 3 hours to track down Arthur's address. He didn't live in a nice house in the suburbs like Gary. He lived in a rundown trailer park on the absolute edge of the county, right where the paved road turned into dirt. When I pulled my Honda up into his lot, my heart sank. The trailer was rusted. The front steps were rotting wood, and the yard were mostly just dead grass and empty dog food cans. This was the man who was supposed to help me take down a millionaire. I got out of the car. I walked up the shaky steps and knocked on the aluminum door. Nobody answered. I knocked again, louder this time. Arthur, are you in there? I heard the sound of heavy boots dragging across the chip floor. The door clicked open just a few inches, and the old man peeked out through the gap. He looked terrible. He was probably only in his late 60s, but he looked 80. His face was deep with wrinkles. His skin was gray, and he had a terrible, rattling cough. We don't want anything, he muttered, starting to shut the door. Arthur, wait, I said quickly, putting my hand flat against the door to stop it. My name is Sarah. Mark Davis was my father. Arthur froze. The coughing stopped. He stared at me through the crack in the door, his eyes wide and suddenly very awake. He looked at my face, tracing my jawline and my eyes, the exact same features my dad used to have. Sarah, he breathed out. His voice sounded like a dry leaves. He looked past me, scanning the dirt road like he expected a police car or Gary to come rushing up. When he saw we were alone, he opened the door and stepped back. You better come inside. The inside of the trailer was dark, smelled like a stale smoke and cheap coffee. He pointed to a draped vinyl chair at the kitchen table. I sat down. He didn't offer me a drink. He just sat across from me, wringing his rough, calloused hands together. Your mom died last week, Arthur said quietly. I read the obituary in the paper. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said. I didn't want to waste time with small talk. I reached into my purse and pulled out my mom's blue diary. I placed it gently on the table between us. My mom's left this for me, I said, looking him dead in the eye. She told me Gary rigged the scaffolding. She told me Gary stole the life insurance money to start his business. And she told me you saw the whole thing. Arthur physically flinched. He looked at the notebook like it was a snake about to bite him. He squeezed his eyes shut and shook his head back and forth. No, Arthur whispered. No, I don't know anything. It was an accident. Your dad was drinking. That's what the police said. Arthur, look at me, I said. My voice steady. My heart was pounding. I'm a nurse. I know what a drinking problem looks like. My dad didn't drink. Gary planted those cans in his trunk, and you know it. Arthur covered his face with his hands. His shoulders started to shake. You don't understand who you are dealing with. Arthur choked down, his voice muffled behind his hands. Gary isn't just some guy. He's powerful around here. If I talk to you, he'd ruin me. Ruin you? I looked around the dark, dirty trailer. Arthur, I mean this with zero disrespect. But what else does he have left to take from you? That hit him. He dropped his hands and looked at me. His eyes were red and filled with tears. I was 20 minutes early to the job site that morning, Arthur said. The words starting spilling out of him fast, like he had been holding them for decades. It was still dark. I saw Gary up on the third level. He had a wrench. I watched him loosen the bolts on the main support race. He didn't just loosen them, Sarah. He completely unthreaded them. 10 minutes later, your dad showed up and climbed up there. I felt my stomach drop. Hearing it read from the diary was one thing. Hearing it out loud from an eyewitness made it so real, it actually made me dizzy. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried. Arthur cried out, slamming his hand on the table. The next day, I went to Gary. I told him what I saw. I told him I was calling the cops. Arthur let out the beady, ugly laugh. Gary didn't even blink. He told me that if I opened my mouth, he would tell the cops I was the one who did it. He reminded me that I was the site foreman. The safety checks were under my name. He said he had the money to hire the best lawyers in the city, and he would make sure I went to prison for life. Arthur slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking completely exhausted. I got scared, Sarah. I had a wife back then. I had a little boy. I packed up my tools and quit the next day. I've been hiding this trailer ever since. Gary stole your dad's life, but he stole mine too. I've spent 28 years looking over my shoulder. We sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the humming of his old refrigerator. I looked at this broken old man. I thought about my mom, trapped in a marriage she hated, dying with a $40,000 medical bill while her husband bought new trucks. I thought about my dad falling through the air because of his friends wanted his money. Arthur, I said softly, are you tired of hiding? He looked up at me. I have life insurance, Jack. I have the diary, but I can't put him in jail without you. I said, I need you to give a sworn statement to the district attorney. We can end this. We can finally make him pay for what he did. Arthur looked at the blue diary on the table. He stared at it for a full minute. Then he took a deep, shaky breath and he sat up straight. For the first time since I walked in, he didn't look terrified. He looked angry. I have nothing left to lose, Arthur said, his voice finally firm. I've been waiting for this day for 28 years. Tell me what to do. I gave him a small nod. I pulled out my phone and scrolled a contact I didn't call for a long time. It was a guy named David. We used to date in college. Now, he was a senior prosecutor at the county district attorney's office. Give me 10 minutes, I told Arthur. I'm going to make a phone call, and then we are going to burn Gary's life to the ground. I stood up, walked out onto the rusted porch, and pressed call. It was time to build a trap. 4 days later, I drove back to my childhood home. The last 4 days, I've been a blur of lawyers, sworn statements, and quiet, heavy police work. Arthur had been amazing. He sat in the cold interview room at the district attorney's office and laid out every single detail of my dad's murder on camera. When David, a prosecutor, saw the sworn statement, the $500 endorsed check, my mom's diary, his jaw practically hit the floor. The legal wheels were moving fast now. Warrants were being inquired by judges. Gary's bank accounts were being secretly monitored. The trap was fully built. Now, all I had to do was spring it. When I pulled into the driveway, Gary's shiny new truck was parked out front. I took a deep breath, unlocked the front door, and walked inside. The house smelled like dust and cardboard. I walked into the living room and froze. Gary was standing in the middle of the room, throwing my mom's clothes, her books, and pictures frames into a cheap black trash bags. What are you doing? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Gary looked up, barely hiding a look of annoyance. He wiped sweat off his forehead and crossed his arm. I'm cleaning up, Sarah. I'm getting the house ready. Ready for what? To sell, he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. The realtor is coming on Tuesday to take photos. The market is hot right now. I figure I can get top dollar, downside into a nice condo near the country club, and put the rest of the cash back into my business. He kicked one of the black trash bags toward me. Since you are here, take your mom's junk. Whatever you don't take by tonight is going to the dump. I just stared at him. He was standing in the house my real father bought. He had killed my dad to get the money to build his life. He had held my mom hostage for almost 3 decades. And now, less than a week after she died, He was throwing her memories into the garbage so he could buy a condo. He didn't just like up Seoul. He was proud of it. No, I said, my voice totally flat. I walked over the couch and sat down, crossing my legs. I'm not taking the bags, Gary. And you're not selling the house. Gary let out a loud, mocking laugh. Excuse me? Little girl, this is my house. My name is on the deed. You don't get a say in what I do with it. Actually, Gary, your name isn't on the deed anymore. The judge put a freeze on the property this morning. Gary stopped laughing. He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, looking at him with absolute disgust. I went to the bank on Monday, I said slowly. I opened Mom's safety deposit box 412. I know you didn't know about it, but I found the life insurance check from 1996, Gary. The one for $500,000, the one you stole. The color completely drained out of Gary's face. He looked like he had been punched in the stomach. But he recovered fast. He always did. You're grieving, Sarah, he said, forcing a fake, calming tone. You're confused. Your mother signed that check over to me to pay off your father's debt. It was perfectly legal. If that's right, I tilted my head. Is that what you told Mom when you threatened to take me away from her? Is that what you told her after she found out you loosened the bolt on the scaffolding? Gary completely froze. The fake nice guy was gone. His face twisted into something ugly, something violent. He took 3 large, heavy steps across the living room until he was standing right over me. He pointed a thick, angry finger right in my face. Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. He spat, his voice shaking with pure rage. I raised you. I put food on the table. Your father was a drunk who fell off a roof because he was stupid to stay sober. If you go around this town spreading lies about me, I will sue you for every penny you have. I will ruin your nursing career. I will destroy you. He was trying to do exactly he did to my mom. He was trying to terrify me into silence. But I wasn't my mom. And I wasn't trapped. I slowly stood up from the couch. I was much shorter than him, but I didn't step back. I looked him dead in his dark, angry eyes. I'm not spreading lies, Gary. I'm spreading evidence, I said. And as for destroying me, you can't, because Arthur already gave his sworn statement to the district attorney yesterday. Gary stopped breathing. I actually saw the muscles in his neck twitch. Arthur, he whispered, his voice suddenly weak. Yeah, Arthur, I nodded. The foreman, he told the DA exactly what he saw you do with that drench. He told them how you threatened his family. The DA reopened the murder case yesterday. They've already frozen your business accounts, Gary. Your money is gone. Gary looked around the living room like he was suddenly trapped in a burning building. Panic was setting in. He started packing back and forth, dragging his hand through his hair. You're bluffing, he muttered, though he clearly didn't believe it. You're bluffing. You can't just come into my house and say this. It's not your house, I said. I picked up my purse and slung it over my shoulder. I will call my lawyers, Gary yelled, his voice cracking. He looked pathetic. The big, tough businessman would suddenly act like a cornered rat. I have friends. I have the best lawyers in the state. Call them, I said calmly. I walked past him toward the front door. But you're going to need a lot more than lawyers, Gary. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at him one last time. He was standing among the black trash bags, shaking completely terrified. I didn't come here to argue with you, Gary, I said quietly. I came here to look you in the eye, because I wanted to remember exactly what your face looked like the moment you realized you had lost everything. I opened the door, walked out into the bright afternoon sun, and left him alone in the house he stole. It was Thursday. Tomorrow night was the Chamber of Commerce dinner. Gary was supposed to be crowned Businessman of the Year. I couldn't wait to watch him receive his award. Friday night arrived, and the parking lot of the Oak Creek Country Club was packed with expensive cars. Inside the main ballroom, the annual Chambers of Commerce dinner was in full swing. This was the biggest night of the year for the wealthy local elite. There were crystal chandeliers, open bars, and perfectly round tables covered in white silk tablecloths. Almost 200 people were sitting there in their expensive suits, cocktail dresses, eating steak and drinking fine wine. I was standing in the back of the room, near the kitchen doors, wearing a simple black dress. I had a perfect view of the stage. Gary was sitting at the head table, front and center. He looked terrible. He was wearing his best tuxedo, but his face was pale and sweaty. He kept checking his phone under the table, probably trying to get a hold of his bankers or his lawyers. But I knew nobody was answering. The DA had completely locked his life down. Still, Gary's ego was too massive to let him skip the dinner. He could still control the narrative. He thought he could just smile through it. At 8:30 p.m., the mayor walked up into the microphone on the stage. The crowd quieted down. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor said, smiling broadly, it is my absolute honor to present this year's award for Businessman of the Year. This award goes to a man who literally built this town. But more importantly, he's a man of the deep family values, a man who recently suffered a tragic loss, but still shows up for his community. Please give a warm round of applause to the owner of Gary's Contracting, Gary Miller. The room erupted into applause. People actually stood up to clap. Gary stood up from his chair. He forced a wide, fake smile onto his face, buttoned a tuxedo jacket, and walked up the steps onto the stage. He shook the mayor's hand and stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at the crowd, soaking up their blind admiration. Thank you, Gary said, his voice echoing through the speakers. He even managed to squeeze out a fake, trembling sigh. This means so much to me. As many of you know, I lost my beautiful life last week. It has been the hardest time of my life. But standing here, looking at all my friends, I know she's looking down on me right now, so proud of the man I am. I felt physically sick hearing him say her name, but I didn't say a word. I just watched the heavy double oak doors at the back of the ballroom. Right as Gary started his next sentence, the door swung open. 4 uniformed police officers and 2 plainclothes detectives walked into the room. They didn't sneak in. They walked with a heavy, purposeful steps straight down the center aisle, right through the middle of the tables. The entire ballroom went dead silent. People stopped clapping. Forks stopped clinking against the plates. Everyone just stared. Gary stopped talking mid-sentence. He saw the police, and his fake smile melted off his face like hot wax. He gripped the edges of the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. The lead detective, a tall man named Harris, walked right up the stairs onto the stage. He didn't care about the mayor. He didn't care about the wealthy crowd. "Gary Miller," Detective Harris said loudly, not bothered to use the microphone. The whole room could hear him anyway. Officer," Gary stammered, his voice suddenly high and panicky. "We are in the middle of the private event. Whatever it is, we can handle it at my office on Monday." "You don't have an office anymore, Mr. Miller," Detective Harris said flatly. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Gasps echoing through the ball. People started whispering furiously. The mayor backed away, looked horrified. "You can't do this," Gary yelled, stepping back from the podium. He was completely lose his composure. The tough, untouchable businessman was gone. He looked like a cornered animal. "I know the chief of police. I have lawyers. This is a misunderstanding. Gary Miller, you are under arrest for first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and grand larceny," Detective Harry said, pulling out his handcuffs. "Turn around." When Gary heard the word murder, his legs actually gave out a little. 2 officers had to grab his arms to keep him standing. They spun him around and clamped the heavy metal cuffs on his wrist. The click-click sound of the cuffs looking echoed through the dead silent room. As they marched him across the stage and down the stairs, Gary frantically looked around the room, begging his rich friends for help, but nobody moved. Nobody said a word. They just stared at him in horror. As the police led him down the center aisle toward the exit, Gary's eyes met mine. I was standing perfectly still in the shadows by the kitchen doors. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him. Gary's mouth fell open. He finally realized it. I hadn't just taken his money or his house. I had completely destroyed his reputation in front of the only people he ever cared about. I took everything. He dropped his head, staring at the floor, and let the police push him out the doors and into the back of a waiting squad car. 3 weeks later, the weather finally started to warm up. Gary was sitting in the county jail, denied bail. The trial was going to take a long time. Just that, David, the prosecutor, told me it was the slam dunk. With author testimony, the diary, and the financial paper trail, Gary was going away for the rest of his miserable life. The state was also in the process of transferring the house and all the stolen money back into my name. I paid off my mom's hospice bill the very next day. That Sunday afternoon, I bought a small bouquet of white flowers and drove out to the old cemetery on the edge of the town. I walked past the new, expensive graves until I reached a quiet, shaded corner under a big oak tree. I knelt in the grass in front of the flat, gray headstone I hadn't visited since I was a little girl. I brushed some dead leaves off the engraved letters. Mark Davis, beloved father. I placed the white flowers against the stone. I traced my fingers over his name. For 28 years, my family had lived in a nightmare disguised as a normal life. But the nightmare was finally over. The truth was out in the daylight. I took a deep breath of the warm spring air. I felt the sun on my face, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, truly safe.